Welcome one and all to yet another juicy, succulent, yet also refreshingly cool Kings of War battle report. Goblins versus Ogres, and this is 1,800 points, using the Invade scenario. So as you can see, the Goblins are taking up quite a bit more space than their Ogre counterparts in this game. And let's just dive into the lists, shall we? So on the Ogre side, we have a horde of shooters. Then this big blob in the middle, we have a horde of Berserker Braves and a horde of Warriors. And I believe one of them is Vicious and one of them is Elite. Behind them, we have a Standard Bearer who is on the left, and he has the Banner of the Griffin. We have Grokkagamok right in the middle of those two units in all his beastly goodness, ready to just take things out with his exploding weaponry. Then we have a Warlock, and behind them we have a troop of Red Goblin Scouts. Over here we have a horde of Boomers, we have a Boomer Sergeant, and we have another troop of Red Goblin Scouts. So there is a bit of chaff available, and there is the full force, mostly in the centre, not too spread out. With Invade, of course, you have to be careful that you're not allowing your opponent to push down the flanks and just camp in your half, but there are ranged threats protecting against that eventuality, and the big wall of combat meat in the centre. Over to the Goblins. So, on one flank we have a regiment of Fleabag Rider Sniffs, and the reason they're deployed at the back is because they're put down with a view to not being shot by the Ogre shooters. Then we've got some Trolls. We've got one unit with the Dwarven Ale, and that would be the unit with the dead elf on its base there. Then in front of them we have a unit that doesn't have any upgrades at all. We have a Troll Bruiser with no upgrades. Then we have another Troll Horde, and that one has the Brew of Courage. Then we have another Troll Bruiser with no upgrade. And then we have the fourth Troll Horde, and this one has the Staying Stone. And behind that one we have two War Trombones, the maximum allowed at this points level. Then we have Grogger's Goons, or horde of them. We have a Flaggit with the Diadem of Dragonkind. Further along still we have the Mincer, and behind them we have another regiment of Fleabag Rider Sniffs. So I'm going to go all the way back to the wide shot of this game here, because what I want to show you with my strategy here, those Ogre shooters are the bane of my existence, and I don't have an awful lot of anti-shooting stuff in this list. So what I would very much like to do is confine them to only shooting at units that have regeneration and units that they're very unlikely to kill in one hit. So I'm not putting any of my Fleabag Rider Sniffs in view of them, I'm not putting the Mincer in view of them, and I'm not really putting the Trombones or my Individual in view of them. The Individual maybe is a bit more safe with it being -1 to hit, but those other things I mentioned, Cavalry and the Mincer, would be just deleted, with no chance of getting the wounds back even if they're lucky enough to survive. So I want them only shooting at things like Grogger's Goons and the Trolls, who are hopefully going to regenerate a bit. And I'm going to push all that big wall of meat towards the opponent's wall of meat. And mine's a little bit more spread out though, but I'm hoping that the two War Trombones backing up my wall of meat will be what decides the game there. And then I've got my two cavalry units, which will be ready just to dart into the opponent's half at the end of the game if need be for the win. So we go to turn 1, and my opponent won the roll-off and elected to go first. So pushing forward, it's Invade, so of course, and not able to get within range of anything really. Just the shooters will be firing this turn. Everything moving up there. Grokkagamok, sometimes I'm pleased to see him behind other units, sometimes I'm not. In this unit I possibly am, because most things in this game are height 2, so he's not going to be able to see my units over the top of his own units. So it is possible that he could get trapped in there without anyone to attack. There is a hill in play as well though, so that could alter things there. But often, if I'm shooting, I've got a really heavy shooting list. I would like to see him on the front lines so I can shoot him off. What do the Ogre shooters manage to do? And the Warlock with his lightning bolt. Well, they put 5 damage onto the Horde of Trolls. This is the one that has no upgrades. Not enough to waver them though, so there's how it looks at the end of turn 1, and I'm going to be plying forward but not throwing my units away willy-nilly here. And of course I have to factor in who the shooters will be able to target as well. So turn 1 for the Goblins. The Sniffs are just positioning themselves in a spot where they can shoot at the enemy, and there's the wall of meat that's moved up there. I've put a couple of units into range. The Boomers, I think they could potentially charge a couple of my units there, but I want to get within my charge range so that they would have to either run away or take the charge next turn. You can see I've regenerated a wound on the Troll Horde there, and the Trombones backing up. Now I've angled the Bruisers slightly because there is the opportunity, if someone charges in to one of my units, for some possible flankery. And here I've moved the Mincer up so that it's looking towards the Goons. The Groggers Goons are the main unit I've thrown in there as a sacrificial lamb. And you can see that the Flaggit has also moved up there. And the Sniffs are just chilling as well. So if you look at that from the wide shot there are 2 units in charge range of Groggers Goons. I would very much like both of them to go in there, because the thing with the Goons, with their dash 21, you really want to be double charging them. It's very, very risky just sending one horde into them. So if he wants to kill them in one go, he's going to have to commit 2 units in there. And by doing that, he's going to leave himself open to charges from me. There's also War Trombones around. So he's going to have to be careful who he decides to block with his chaff units as well. There's a lot to consider if he wants to take out those Goons in one go, because they are clearly a trap. It just depends whether he thinks he can defend himself sufficiently from the counter-attack that's coming his way. Turn 2 for the Ogres, and the Berserker Braves and the Warriors do steam into Groggers Goons, so I would expect them to die now. If they get lucky and survive, that's going to open up a world of pain for the Ogres, but they're very likely to die. And you can see that the Goblin Scouts have positioned themselves in front of the Bruiser and the other Trolls there. So because he doesn't want to block his shooting from the Ogre shooters onto the Trolls on the hill, he doesn't want to move beyond the halfway point with his cavalry there. He doesn't want to give them cover against shooting, and because so much of these units are height 2, the Bruiser is now going to be very limited in what it can see past them as well. Even though he's nimble, he may not have any charges available to him. But the Trolls on the left, should they survive a round of shooting, they will be able to attack one of the Ogre units on the left there. On this side, all the breath attacks are moving up, and they're going to try to take out a unit. So the Ogre shooters and the Warlock combined, they do 5 damage to the horde of Trolls on the hill there, but they're not going to be able to waver them. Staying Stone is in effect there. And the breath attacks over here. The Boomer Horde and the Boomer Sergeant, what do? Well, look at that, 11 damage onto that Troll Horde. It is inspired though, which results in only a waver. And Groggers Goons do get killed, quite handily, as expected, from the double charge, but he's now left himself in a position where my Mincer has a flank charge onto his Berserker Braves. And there isn't enough room to avoid that. He can't go backwards far enough because he's pushed his heroes up behind the unit. So I think really he would want to be moving backwards there. I think he would have to get 2 or 3 inches, but obviously he doesn't have room for that. The other options would be pivoting, but if you don't pivot perfectly aligned, which I'm not sure would be possible because of the heroes behind, then you would then allow the Mincer to charge the other unit, I think, and the Trolls potentially charging the rear of the Berserkers, or at least the flank. So they decide to just line up straight ahead like that to make sure the Trolls aren't flanking anybody, and just accepting that the Mincer is going to have a flank charge. So the Trolls, big troll block in the middle, all my troll units, and most of them are going to be able to do something now, although the wavered unit is blocking up one unit behind them. So apart from those two, the two bruisers are going to be able to fight, and the other two troll hordes should be able to get into the action now. You can see that Grokkagamok is behind the horde of ogre warriors there. You will be able to see onto the hill, so anything I leave on the hill is a potential charge target for him, so I have to keep that in mind as well. And you can see how I've made sure that the ogre shooters can't take off any of my stuff on the left. I'm keeping it all behind those woods. Turn 2 for the goblins, and Harambe the Bruiser charges out into the ogre boomers to stop them shooting, because I would rather he get attacked than any of the hordes. They're worth more unit strength, and they're just better at killing in general. The Troll Bruiser here goes into the Red Goblin Scouts that were up there and takes them out. The two War Trombones climb up onto the hill and, with no cover, decide to try and scorch Grokkagamok. And I would hope to get a fair bit of damage on him, but only 3. I would hope to do a little bit more than that. Be hoping for maybe 5 damage there, but a little bit disappointing. So the Mincer in the flank of the Berserker Braves. It is a decent amount of damage, that I would say, 9. So that means they're looking very vulnerable now, so if I manage to charge them with something else, I would hope they should be very close to death. The Troll Horde that were behind, slightly obscured by the cavalry on the hill, charge into the Ogre Warriors, and the Flaggit decides to sacrifice itself to make sure that the Berserker Braves will not be able to flank charge the Trolls, by positioning himself directly in front of them, perfectly aligned with where the Trolls will end up. So if they charge the Flaggit there, they will not be able to overrun into the Trolls, and there's no way they can get to the flank of the Trolls with a single pivot. So they'll most likely attack him or countercharge the Mincer. So there's how it looks. And the sacrificial play to get rid of Grogger's goons, at the moment it's kind of in the balance as to whether that is successful or not. I have managed to strike the first blow and get some damage on, although you'll see that I only did 7 damage there on the Ogre Warriors, which isn't that vast, but it's a decent return there from the Trolls, so I'd hope to finish that unit off at some point as well. The Trolls are damaged though, so they could die from the countercharge potentially, and Grokkagamok has a choice of targets on that hill as well. So actually one thing to note here, tactically, the War Trombones being on the hill, if Grokkagamok charges them, he's possibly in a bit of a pickle, because if he wants to escape from the Troll Bruiser charging him, he would have to overrun. And if he overruns, he will be charged by the Troll Horde, which would then be in the flank if he wants to attack one of the Trombones. So if he wanted to then turn on the spot after fighting a Trombone, he would get double charged by the Bruiser and the Troll Horde. So I'm quite happy to sacrifice a Trombone to get a wounded Grokkagamok onto that hill and in charge range. If he charges the Bruiser, then I've either got a Troll Horde to slam into him, or I could just turn whichever Trombones are still alive to shoot him. So I think he would probably kill the Bruiser if he went in there. So that's possibly the thing I would like him to do the least. I want him to go after one of the Trombones, really, because it's worth less, and that would give me 2 combat units to charge him with, probably, because I don't think he would risk the overrun. Turn 3 for the Ogres. So the Berserker Braves countercharge the Mincer. They may well take that out, even though it is defense 6. They'll probably kill it. You don't need much. It's not got very high nerve. The Ogre Warriors charge into the Trolls, only on 3 damage though, so they've got a chance at survival there. The Standard Bearer charges into my Flaggit, but he's not got many attacks, so he only needs to do 1 damage to stop me using the Diadem though, so that'll be his goal there. He's probably not thinking that he's going to kill it in 1 round. Only 3 attacks. And Grokkagamok is weighing up his options at this stage. Over on this side, the Boomers countercharge Harambe the Bruiser. you can see that the Red Goblin Scouts have charged into the Troll Horde there, and the Boomer Sergeant has moved up. He's hoping to try and finish off that heavily damaged horde of trolls directly in front of him. So Grokkagamok decides he is going to go after one of the trombones in the end, which is acceptable. The shooters then target the other trombone on the hill, do 8 damage, so they do kill it. And I'm kind of glad about that as well. I'm glad they did not target the Bruiser, because they've got a chance of killing the Bruiser in one go. It's by no means guaranteed, but they could even waver him, which would give me one less thing to attack the Grokster with in a minute. So I'm glad the trombones are drawing a lot of fire there. Over here you can see more damage is being toasted onto those trolls, and they are toasted alive. Their flesh is just cooking up nicely. I know it's troll flesh, so you have to hurry up and eat it once it's nicely cooked. And there we go, dead. Nothing is achieved in this combat though. Those Red Goblin Scouts do nothing to the Troll Horde. Harambe the Bruiser is wavered, which is fine because he's still tying up the Boomers, because I think Boomers are just as good at fighting combat as they are at shooting. So the main goal of throwing the Bruiser in there is to make sure that the only person they can fight is the Bruiser, and the fact that he's wavered means that that objective is still being upheld, even though I can't fight them. Because they will struggle to get a clear shot at other units while he's standing there. Over here, you can see that the Troll Horde is actually killed by the warriors there, so a little bit disappointing that they've died. But the Flaggit takes 0 damage from the Standard Bearer, which means that he's going to be able to use his Diadem of Dragonkind in this upcoming turn, which could be very, very important. The Mincer is also dead, as expected on the countercharge, but it did its job, got a big juicy chunk of damage, and those Braves have pivoted themselves so that they are not within the charge arc of the Sniffs there. Because obviously being recharged by them would be a bad idea. And Grokkagamok kills the other trombones. So both trombones dead, and he decides he's not going to go for an overrun, because that would be suicide. He's just going to sit where he is and eat a double charge to the face. I think if he wanted to go backwards and get off the hill, he would have needed to get 3 inches. And if he only got 1 or 2 inches, he would have been double flank charged. So that would have been instant death for him. So he decides not to risk that, the 1 in 3 chance. With a 2 in 3 chance of being absolutely annihilated, he decided not to take that. And in fact, if he'd been side on, I wouldn't even have needed to throw both units in. The Bruiser could have just attacked somebody else, and the Troll unit in the flank undoubtedly would have been enough to kill him. So, there's how it looks. And the fact that the Flaggit is still alive and undamaged and able to shoot is quite important here, because I've got a lot of damaged units I want to be targeting. So at this stage I've got choices. Do I go all in on the Grokster? That was the initial plan. But the Troll's being killed though, to the left of where Grocky is, has given me some pause to consider things there. Turn 3 for the Goblins. So the Sniffs are just moving up out of anyone's charge range. They can still be shot from the Boomer Sergeant, but they just move up there, getting closer to enemy territory and start shooting him. This horde of trolls, they kill, this is on the right flank, they kill the cavalry unit that were blocking them in, so they're moving towards the Boomers now. However, little do I know, I haven't pivoted them enough to avoid the shooting arc of the Ogre shooters in the opposite corner. And here I decide I'm going for the double charge on the Grokster, and do a reasonable amount of damage. I think I did about the average, which is what I was hoping for, and that is enough to waver him, which is fine. It stops him attacking. It'll be, however, there is the unit of warriors there who could easily kill the Bruiser next turn if they're able to. However, look at this. Wow. The Flaggit with his Diadem Dragonkind manages to put 4 damage onto the warriors and waver them, so they are now also stuck. So both those units there being wavered is huge, because now the Troll Bruiser and the Troll Horde are safe from being charged. Over here, the Sniffs get just nicely behind the Berserker Braves, out of sight of the shooters, and fire some arrows in there. just a little bit of damage, but lining up for a rear charge as well, so that unit has a decision to make now. Do they stay where they are? Do they attack things and continue to face the trolls, which means they'll be rear charged by the sniffs? Or do they turn around and face the sniffs and maybe even get rear charged by something else? And a bit of a tricky situation. So it's still up in the air though, but those two units becoming wavered has swung it, in my opinion, very much towards the goblin side here. Turn 4 for the ogres. So the boomer sergeant moves in front of the trolls, which is going to prevent them from charging the boomer horde. And the boomer horde will be attacking something. I think they might actually be shooting the trolls in this turn. Over here, the Berserker Braves and the Standard Bearer both attack the Flaggit, so he's not going to survive again, surely. Especially undamaged. And the shooters, they put 4 damage onto the Bruiser on the hill, but do not manage to waver him, which could be very important. And Harambe the Bruiser, it looks like, gets wavered again in that combat. And down here, from the toasty... Actually, I don't know, that might be the waver from last time. The toastiness from the Boomer Sergeant gets these trolls pretty up there in damage, but can't waver them. The Warlock, with his lightning bolts, puts a bit of damage onto the sniffs that are avoiding the shooters there behind the forest. And the Flaggit does get annihilated by those 2 units, as expected. So he's gone, but it's still looking okay there. We haven't lost any units in the middle. And Harambe the Bruiser has been wavered again in combat there, yep. Which is fine, because again, he's just standing in front of that unit. And after next turn, then there's not going to be an open shot. I think this turn they just managed to avoid possibly shooting through cover at the troll horde. So what I'm glad that the... Let's see... Actually, I was thinking that I'm glad the Ogre shooters didn't shoot at the troll horde there on the right-hand side. Because combining that with the Boomer Sergeant's breath there could have been quite bad, potentially. But they did elect to shoot the Bruiser instead, prioritising that, which I'm pleased about because he was undamaged. Turn 4 for the trolls. So... actually, did Harambe become unwavered this turn? They have taken damage, but that might be from shooting that. I may have shot them with the sniffs there. I'm not sure actually. Maybe that waver token isn't meant to be there. I don't remember exactly, but they've taken damage. It's either from Harambe the Bruiser or it's from the sniffs that are on to the right of them. And the Boomer Sergeant is killed by the trolls there, who regenerated some wounds as well. And these trolls killed off Grokkagamok, finished him off quite handily. He was already really up there in damage. And the Troll Bruiser here wavers the Ogre Warriors. So another useful waver here. That's going to tie them up. I think those dice are actually inaccurate on the back there. I think one of them's tipped over and it's supposed to be on a 6. And look at this. The rear charge from the Fleabag Sniffs into the Berserker Braves, finishes them off, they are dead, and then the sniffs back up a bit so that the shooters cannot see them, and they manage to get just far enough. So there's how that's looking. Very healthy at this stage. The shooters are still a threat, obviously, and I've still got that unit of trolls in a position where they can be shot by the Ogre shooters, unfortunately, the unit of trolls on the right. Because they hadn't been shot by them earlier, I don't think it was fresh in my mind that was a potential thing. I didn't realise how close it was to being in or out of the shooting arc there, so I didn't bother really pivoting them with that in mind. So unfortunately they are still able to be shot by the shooters there, that unit on the right behind Harambe. You can see the sniffs where they've gone though in the top of the screen there, up behind the house to threaten the boomers from the flank. And it's looking alright, because especially with that unit of warriors being wavered in the middle, it's looking pretty healthy for the goblins right now. The ogres are not really advancing into my territory, and I'm very much advancing into theirs, so for the invade scenario, very good news. Turn 5 for the ogres. So, Standard Bearer flank charges the Troll Bruiser there. And the warriors, I think they might back up a bit there. That's what it looks like. And the warlock is chilling around there as well. I think he's going to have another go at the sniffs. Boomers back into Harambe the Bruiser. And a bit more damage done to that sniff regiment, but not enough to waver them, so that's good. The shooters do manage to target that unit that I mentioned. Could have pivoted out of their shooting arc, but I just didn't spot it at the time, so they take some more damage, but luckily they don't pay the price. Harambe the Bruiser gets wavered again, which is fine, because the trolls are there to help out in a second. And this troll bruiser doesn't take anything, I think, from the standard bearer there. So, not a very effective turn for the ogres, and they're about to pay the price for it, because I've got quite a few options here. Got the bruiser in the middle at the bottom there, who could charge into those warriors and finish them off. The trolls could finish off the standard bearer in the flank quite handily. The sniffs on the left are probably going to target the warlock, try and do a bit of damage on him. And then on the right, I've got the troll horde and the sniffs that could double charge, one of them in the flank, into the boomer regiment, while Harambe the Bruiser just recovers due to his waver. So turn 5, and this is exactly what happens. So the sniffs charge into the flank of the boomers, the trolls in the front, eat them for breakfast, and now we've got 2 happy, merry old scoring units in the opponent's half, which is handy for the scenario. And look at this though. So the bruiser charges into the warriors, piles more damage on them, but then the dreaded double one comes up. This is my first double one of the game, I think. But to make up for that, the Fleabag Sniffs managed to kill off the warlock in 1 round of shooting from an undamaged state, so that's nice. I think they did maybe about 5 damage on him and just turned him into an ogre-shaped pincushion. And these guys managed to kill off the standard bearer in the flank quite handily. So it's looking very healthy. Despite that double one, all that unit can really do is kill the bruiser, which is okay, because look at the scoring units I've got. And that unit of ogres is definitely going to die, unless I double one them again next turn. But I've got trolls there to finish them off. I've got my sniffs. And up at the top there, I've got 3 units in enemy territory just completely unopposed. So the shooters in this turn just hit the floor. They miss everything. Did I not take a picture of the turn dice in this turn? Doesn't look like it. So, ogre shooters hit absolutely nothing, so we get a nice picture of the carpet. No wounds done whatsoever. The bruiser is killed though by the warriors, as expected. He paid the price for that juicy double one. So that's going to be the end of turn 6 for the ogres. So, goblin turn 6 coming up. And here we go. So, the trolls there, which are the troll horde in the middle at the bottom of the screen there. So, they managed to kill off the warrior horde, which had already been heavily damaged. The sniffs just move up further into enemy territory and put a bit of damage onto the shooters with their ranged attack. And that is that. So, there is no turn 7. That is how the game ends. It ends up being quite a decisive victory for the goblins. I think most of these units are actually scoring at the end of the game. I'm not sure about the sniffs. I think maybe they're just slightly not in enemy territory 100%. The trolls in the middle, I'm not 100% sure on, but the 3 units at the top, obviously, completely stuck in the enemy half, and thus scoring in the invade scenario. The ogres have nobody in my half at all, so very, very decisive win. That was looking terrible at one stage, and then even when it was looking bad, though, when I was losing units, they were units that I had planned to lose, so I think they were acceptable losses. For example, Grogger's goons going down gave me the opportunity to charge more of the enemy units, because the enemy clearly had a shooting superiority at range with the ogre shooters. They're better than my sniffs at long range shooting, and at short range shooting, the boomer horde and the boomer sergeant versus the war trombones and the diadem, I would say the ogres have the advantage there because all of my short range shooter units are just really easy to take off, whereas the ogre ones aren't. So I wanted to get it into a combat game as fast as possible, And I didn't want to do that by just throwing all my units forward and inviting the first charge, because it's quite possible I could lose multiple units that way. The ogre units are capable of taking down trolls in a single round with a bit of luck. Grokkagumok doesn't even need luck to do it. So I'm glad he was behind the enemy lines rather than on the front lines. And the Grogger's goons, I think, were a worthy sacrifice just to get the combat started on my terms a bit more. Grokkagumok charging the war trombone, I was very glad to see that. Allowed me to then double charge him. And of course that whole area could have gone differently if my Flaggit had become disordered and thus unable to scorch the warriors and waver them. That could have led to the end of my Troll Bruiser, and then the warriors would have been required to finish off Grocky on their own. And it would have just tilted the balance a little bit the other way. I think the right flank was always looking pretty healthy. The trolls there, I overloaded the trolls on that flank. I had 2 units, one behind the other there. Even though the one in the front became wavered, I knew I would need some backup there, because those boomers, if you only throw one thing at them and they take it out, they're going to be able to maybe get into your flank. They can move and then turn towards you and look down your lines and start flaming things, and even if you turn towards them, they've got another turn to shoot you. And you don't want units like that to get into your flank, so I put quite a lot of units over there to counteract that ranged threat. And the wall of ogre meat in the middle, drawing that towards me with the Grogger's goons, allowed me to then get the first hit in on some of the units with my big hitters. The Mincer managed to get the flank charge, which is always nice, started racking up damage, and then the more damage you can accumulate over time, the more chance you get of taking them out later on, as you saw. And key thing that I stuck to for the whole game was keeping my units that could be killed in one go by the shooters out of the sight of the shooters. Looking back, I'm not sure the sniffs on the left flank were used as well as I could have done. I did have an option to try and get them behind that hill and then move them up alongside the shooters and really threaten them and make them think about being shot and flanked, or even rear charged if I'd got into position for that. But in the end, I just decided to ignore the shooters and just hope they didn't kill anything and just concentrate on everything else, because with the invade scenario, ogre shooters are only really valuable for killing. They are never going to score, because every turn they're moving, that's just a really expensive shooting unit that you're not shooting with. So I was fairly happy to let them sit where they were and not worry about threatening them too much. Just kill everything that might score, push forward, preferably on the flank of the shooters so that they're not going to be able to turn and shoot me, and it ended up paying off. The dice rolls, there was a bit of craziness on both sides. Of course, I had that double 1 on the warriors, and my opponent had a couple of lowish nerve rolls as well. There was the time the trolls on the right became wavered instead of being killed when they were on, I think it was 11 damage. And there were a couple of others slightly below par nerve rolls as well. But that being said, I think the armies were pretty evenly matched, and it was a close game up to a point, and then the goblins ended up running away with it in the end. So don't forget to drop any comments in on this game, any thoughts on the lists. This is practice for a tournament that's probably being played on the day that this video goes up, so I don't want to put it up in advance and give away all my potential game-winning strategies. So thoughts on the lists, thoughts on the game, thoughts on if you spotted any rules that were played incorrectly, because there's always at least a couple in these things, with every single move in the game being chronicled photographically. And don't forget to check out all the links in the description, the social media shenanigans, Facebook, Twitter and so on. Send me all your money. Don't forget to leave a comment and like the video and all that good stuff. And all that remains to be said is, good night out there, whatever you are.